aware that from the river to the sea is a call for genocide of the Jews?
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free.
Don't fucking touch me.
To the sea, Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. What does that mean? And why is that phrase a unifying factor to all these Hamas demonstrations worldwide? In fact, that violent footage you just witnessed, was that in Paris? Was that in Germany? Was that in the Netherlands? Where was that? That was in Miami, Florida, folks. And the victim who was assaulted by these Hamas demonstrators was none other than one of our own cameramen. And he was there legally videotaping on public space and was assaulted by these individuals. We're going to, in a future show, in the very near future, do an expose on this assault that took place in Miami, Florida. In fact, we're entitling a future show in the very near future, Jihad in Miami, a warning to America. But in order for you to understand why these individuals are standing on American street corners and in fact getting violent, you need to understand the doctrine, their belief system behind their actions. You see, doctrine results in action. And we're going to lay that out in this show. We're also in this show going to bring the wonderful Dr. Martin Sherman, and he's going to detail the battle that's taking place right now in Israel to destroy the tunnels of the Hamas. So we got an exciting show planned for you, Dr. Martin Sherman. But first, we're going to take a look at the doctrines, the unifying doctrines of the Hamas. And let's take a look right now at the first page of the Hamas Charter. Israel will exist and continue to exist. Not bad. They make a little change here, though. Israel will exist and continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it has obliterated others before. Hassan al-Banna, the founding of the Muslim Brotherhood, said that, and the Hamas, which is a wing of the Muslim Brotherhood, uses it in their opening covenant to tell the world what they're all about. They're all about the obliteration of Israel. And Hassan al-Banna, 22-year-old in 1928, wanting to revive the Islamic Caliphate after the Ottoman Empire fell, also came up with a little ditty entitled, From the River to the Sea. He laid out theocratically and geopolitically that is the obligation of Quran-believing Muslims to obliterate Israel and move them from the river, if we can take a look at this map, from the river, the Jordan River, to the sea. If you look at that map, on the east side of Israel is the Jordan River. On the west side of Israel is the Mediterranean Sea. The West Bank, when you hear that, is the west bank of the Jordan River, which is on the east side of Israel. It is the obligation of the Muslim Brotherhood, its wing, military wing, the Hamas, to obliterate Jewish people and the Jewish state from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. Nothing else satisfies. Let's continue a little bit in the charter. It says right here on page 2, the covenant of the Islamic resistance movement, the Hamas, clarifies its picture, reveals its identity, outlines its stand, explains its aims, speaks about its hopes, and calls for the support, adoption, and joining its ranks. It goes on to ask all Arab countries everywhere to get involved in this obliteration of Jewish people from the river to the sea. Article 2 of the Hamas Covenant says, the Islamic resistance movement is one of the wings of the Muslim Brotherhood in Palestine. Muslim Brotherhood movement is a universal organization which constitutes the largest Islamic movement in modern times. It's characterized by its deep understanding, accurate comprehension, and complete embrace of all Islamic concepts of life. This is the same Muslim Brotherhood, folks, that is active in the United States in the Obama White House. Moving on, as we lay the profile for the enemy that the Israelis are fighting today on the ground in Gaza, listen to this. The day of judgment will not come. The Constitution of the Hamas says, until the Muslims fight the Jews, killing the Jews, when the Jew will hide behind the stones and trees. And this is out of Bukhari. The stones and trees will say, O Muslims, O Abdullah, there's a Jew hiding behind me. Let's kill him. And that concept there in their covenant says, the world will so hate Jews that even inanimate objects like a tree will tell the Muslim chasing the Jew, O Jew, O Muslim, this Jew is hiding behind me, the tree speaking, come and kill him. That's where this movement of the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad wants to go. Article 8 of the covenant says, Allah is the target of the Hamas, the Prophet its model, the Quran its constitution, jihad is its path, and death for the sake of Allah is the loftiest wishes. When a Hamas militant warrior hides behind a young child, they believe theocratically that if both of them get killed, both are martyrs and both are doing good. In fact, the Hamas will even elevate to martyr stature in Gaza those who have died in that manner. So the use of women and children in wartime is a doctrine of the Muslim Brotherhood of the Hamas. And it's got tremendous propaganda value, as we're seeing. Then here, I want to close our little teaching section on the Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the enemy Israel's fighting right now in Gaza, with a concept of sacred space. And this is why there can never, ever, ever be peace. The two-state solution is absurd. The belief of the Hamas and Islamic Jihad is simply that the Islamic resistance movement believes that the land of Palestine is an Islamic waqf, W-A-Q-F, waqf. And that simply means this. Once Muslims take land, regardless of who owned that land previously, then from Allah's perspective, theologically, that land is always Islamic. It is the goal of every faithful Muslim to fight till death to get that land back. So what? The Jews owned the land for 3,000 years. The Muslims took it over for a few hundred years. It's theirs. So what? The Jews were awarded their own land in 1948. Has nothing to do with Islamic doctrine. Islamic doctrine simply says it's waqf, W-A-Q-F. It's sacred space. Every Muslim must die in regaining Palestine, Israel, for the Muslim believer. This is a law governing the land of Palestine in the Islamic Sharia law. I'm reading from their covenant. And the same goes for any land the Muslim has conquered by force. Because during the times of Islamic conquests, Muslims have consecrated these lands to Muslim generations until the day of judgment. This fight, folks, goes on till the day of judgment. Watch the interview with Dr. Martin Sherman to see how this battle is going to go on in the next couple of days. Critically important. All right, let's go back to Dr. Martin Sherman, the Israeli Institute for Strategic Studies, Executive Director. As our viewers now know, Dr. Sherman is a highly credentialed expert on geopolitical affairs, political affairs, military affairs, based in Israel, taught at Tel Aviv University, now runs essentially a think tank dealing with this. Most recently, he writes a regular column called In the Fray, most recently an article in the Jerusalem Post, basically saying a restraint is a foolish military doctrine. To have restraint in warfare, fighting an enemy that wants to push you from the river to the sea, that doctrinally and from their charter, the Hamas, calls for your complete obliteration. To exercise restraint, Dr. Sherman says, when fighting that enemy is the height of illogic, irrationality, and foolishness. So go look at our past couple of shows to get the whole interview. But on this particular interview, I want to talk about a possible ground invasion that may be involved right now, and the element of surprise that the Hamas may have for the Israelis, that is a sophisticated tunnel network in the Gaza Strip. I mentioned before, a few years back, I was able to go into the Cu Chi tunnels in Vietnam, and navigate through rudimentary tunnels back then, but sophisticated for the 60s, 1960s. And to see how the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese were able to fight in such a way as to come up behind the enemy. I'm going to ask Dr. Sherman to give us insight into this tunneling system and how the Hamas could use it to an advantage over the IDF.
Okay, Tom, just before we go to the tunnel, I'd just like to make a remark regarding what you said previously. You should know it's not only the Hamas Charter that advocates the destruction of Israel. The Fatah, the allegedly moderate faction of the Palestinians, has a constitution which is also dedicated to eliminating the Zionist entity from the river to the sea. So, you know, I think we do ourselves a great disservice by focusing only on the murderous intentions of the Hamas and sort of putting a lot of cosmetics on exactly the same intentions which are expressed, if anything, more explicitly in the constitution of the Fatah. So that's just something in parentheses. It's
a great point. It's an excellent point, and we have seen and published those documents. But I think there's a Westerners want peace and want to reach out, even if someone is speaking peace, even though they've written death and destruction. So we'll have to have you back, and we'll go through those documents at some point for our viewers. But let's get into these tunnels, because I fear that they can be used in a very powerful tactical advantage over the IDF.
Yeah, well, basically the Palestinians have four ways of attacking Israel. One is overland on the surface. The other is through the sky with their rockets and mortars. The third way is trying to infiltrate through the sea. And the third one is going underground and tunneling up until you reach some sort of strategic objective. The first three have been reasonably effectively curtailed at the moment. It's quite difficult for them to infiltrate overland because of fences and the barriers that have been set up, minefields. So that's more or less been blocked to a certain extent. Obviously not hermetically, but it's been blocked to a large extent. The missile effectiveness has been greatly degraded in this particular engagement by the Iron Dome. As I say, it's quite feasible that they'll find some way to overwhelm it in the next engagement. Through the sea, they've tried once or twice. Apparently, the marine capabilities are not that advanced. But what is a very serious threat is underground tunneling, which they can do virtually undetected until they reach a strategic objective and then burst out in time they consider advantageous. And by the way, you should remember the Gilad Shalit episode, where two IDF soldiers were killed and one was abducted and eventually exchanged for thousands of Palestinian prisoners, was executed through a tunnel. We found in this engagement 2 tunnels were found, but of course, you know, you're always limited to the intelligence you have. You may miss a tunnel, you might not know about it. You talked about Vietnam. I haven't had the chance to go to Vietnam, but I have had the chance to go to the demilitarized zone in Korea, and you see the massive tunnels that the North Koreans have dug deep into the south, and most of which were only found by sheer coincidence, and no one knows how many other tunnels there are. And of course, it's not beyond the bounds of feasibility that North Korean engineers, Iranian engineers, will be helping the Palestinians and the Hezbollah to tunnel under the Israeli border and bring them close to some strategic site, either with the special commando forces, which could, say, attack an airfield, paralyze the runways, take a large number of Israelis hostage for ransom, for negotiating the release of thousands of Palestinian terrorists, or for extorting other sort of concessions. So these tunnels are certainly a strategic threat and very, very difficult to deal with unless you control the area from where they're being dug.
Yeah, and folks, again, as this war continues, we're going to bring you some of this information as to how these brave men and women with the IDF have to fight, particularly have to fight in this urban area. These tunnels are not just long underground holes. They're very sophisticated rooms that have ventilation, they have communications, command and control, they got hospitals down there, they've got storage for munitions. They can go down in one sewer top or in a false top somewhere in Gaza, come up a half a mile later somewhere else. There's booby traps in these if IDF soldiers have to go down and look. But once a squad goes through a particular area on the ground, clears it militarily, they think they've got the advantage, and all of a sudden 8 fighters pop up behind them in a suicide mission to kidnap 1 or 2 IDF soldiers. They'll sacrifice 7 Hamas warfighters to capture 1 or 2 IDF soldiers because they know the Israelis will release 1,000 to 1. And they have that psychological advantage now of having a beloved son of the IDF, with these possible beheading videos. Get ready for this sort of stuff. Does Israel, Dr. Sherman, does Israel have the will to fight this sort of horrendous type battle that the Hamas wants to prosecute?
Well, that really is what's called the $64,000 question. I think that the Hamas has every reason to believe that Israel doesn't. I hope it'll be proved wrong. You talked earlier about what I wrote in my article about the inevitable and the imbecilic. When you come down to the tunnels, these tunnels have lighting and ventilation systems driven by electricity that Israel supplies Gaza with. They've been built with concrete that Israel, in its humanitarian gesture, allows the Hamas to import into Gaza. And so basically we're allowing the enemy to build the capacity to kill us. And as I said before, the imbecilic and the inevitable. And unless somehow we can change the public discourse in Israel and stiffen the will of the government, because I said before, I think the Israeli government is misreading its function. It seems to be intent on managing the country, in which case it needs to keep calm as long as possible, rather than lead the nation to secure its future down the line.
Yeah, very, very good point. We have about 1 minute left with you, Dr. Sherman, and I'd like you to take that time and speak to the American folks, elected officials and regular folks who indeed want to stand with Israel at this defining moment in Western civilization. I truly believe it is. Because if Israel isn't going to fight an enemy that seeks its complete obliteration, the jihad world is watching. They want to see who's going to blink first. They believe they have the will of Allah now to move with their caliphate. Israel's at a point where they can stop that. What is your word to American elected officials and American citizens who want to stand with Israel?
Well, I think one of the most remarkable things is that Israel enjoys a 4-to-1 advantage over the Palestinians in the Israeli general public. It has very little support in Foggy Bottom, in the State Department, and probably in this administration's White House. So what I would say, what the American people should try and do is convey 2 messages. One, to the Israeli people, that they have their unmitigated support in their righteous fight for survival and for the advance of civilized values in a very, very dangerous and barbaric part of the world. And 2, to the American elected leaders, that they are standing with us and they will not accept any betrayal of American commitment to Israel. So I think that's what I would ask the American public to do.
All right. Dr. Martin Sherman, we appreciate what you're doing. Keep it up and stay safe there. We'll be back to you on a regular basis for your insight and your opinion, okay?
Thank you.
We'll see you. Once again, Dr. Martin Sherman is on point with his analysis and conclusions that this battle is not simply a regional or territorial issue, but indeed an essential element of the continuation of Western civilization. Folks, the big idea for today's show is simply that we have a dedicated enemy in the Hamas who will go to such a degree to fulfill its doctrinal beliefs, to dig underground and find a way up through the dirt to kill Jews. Think about that for a moment. Think of what's possessing someone who has the opportunity to live peaceably but chooses to follow doctrine, to live in a constant state of battle, and will do so by clawing their way through a tunnel to steal, kidnap, or kill Jews. Unbelievable. But this is the real state of affairs. And it's the state of affairs that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has to deal with. And my humble admonition, sir, at the end of this show is very simple. We see right now players on the global scene trying to interject their views and their policies in the affairs of your state and your people. Our admonition to you today is simply, please, for the sake of your protection of your people and the protection of your state, and for Western civilization, do not let these individual players in any way, shape, or form influence the policy decisions you have to make for that which you know is true, right, and just.